Even everyday tasks carry inherent dangers. Cooking over an open fire in a thatched hut is a constant fire hazard. Working with unrefined tools means frequent cuts, splinters, and blunt trauma. Traveling, as we briefly touched upon, is perilous. Roads are poorly maintained, if they exist at all. Bandits are a real threat. Wild animals, wolves, bears are a concern, especially outside settled areas. And then there's the weather. A harsh winter could mean starvation, frostbite, and death. A prolonged drought could devastate crops and livestock. You are utterly at the mercy of nature, with none of the technological buffers that protect us today. No central heating, no air conditioning, no weather forecasts. You live and die by the sun, the rain, and the seasons. It would be enough, too, make you wish you'd packed a bigger emergency kit. You might even find yourself inventing a rudimentary form of weather app, but it would just tell you, it's cold, still cold, looks like more cold. Your body is now truly screaming at you. Your modern muscles, unused to such constant, unvarying exertion, are protesting with every movement. Imagine your hands, once soft and accustomed to keyboards and touchscreens, now calloused, cracked, and probably bleeding in places. Every time you have to lift something heavy or stoop low to tend to a crop, you're reminded of the immense physical demands. Your spine, used to supportive chairs and ergonomic desks, would be in constant rebellion. And sleep, when it comes, is barely a relief. The straw of your mattress pokes and scratches, the damp chill seeps into your bones, and the ever-present sounds of the villaged distant barking of dogs, the occasional cry of an infant, the rustle of unseen creatures mean a truly restful night is a rare luxury. You'd be perpetually tired, running on fumes, and the lack of caffeine would only exacerbate your exhaustion. Forget your morning espresso. Your only stimulant is the cold splash of reality. You might even try to boil some acorns for a coffee. Substitute, but it would taste like bitter dirt and sadness. You'd quickly discover that your modern, scripted concept of personal space is non-existent. You live cheek by jowl with your family, sometimes with your livestock, in small, cramped quarters. There's no escaping the smells, the sounds, the constant presence of others. Privacy is a luxury afforded only to the highest nobility, and even then, it's relative. You're never truly alone, never truly free from observation. Its constant proximity, combined with the hardships, would undoubtedly lead to frayed nerves and increased tensions, squabbles over resources, over chores, over anything would be common. Your coping mechanisms for stress, like taking a quiet walk or listening to music with headphones, are simply unavailable. You're trapped in a pressure cooker of communal living, physical discomfort, and existential dread. Hey, it's a bit like living in a reality TV show, but with more manure and less prize money. As the sun climbs higher, you're forced to confront the lack of personal freedom. If you're a peasant, you're tied to the land. You can't just pack up your bags and move to the next village, or seek a better job. You belong to your lord, and your life is dictated by his rules and the customs of the manor. Your children inherit your status. There's almost no social mobility. You were born a peasant, you live a peasant, and you die a peasant. Your dreams of self-improvement, of pursuing your passions, of choosing your own path, would be utterly shattered. This isn't a meritocracy. It's a rigid hierarchy. Even if you manage to acquire a rare skill like blacksmithing, you'd likely be part of a guild, bound by their rules and traditions, unable to innovate or strike out on your own without their blessing. You'd quickly learn that medieval life is a masterclass in accepting your fate. The pervasive illiteracy is another shock. Most people cannot read or write. Even among the nobility, only a fraction are truly literate. Books are rare and expensive, painstakingly copied by hand, often by monks. Information travels slowly, by word of mouth, by traveling merchants, or by formal pronouncements from your Lord or the church. There's no internet, no newspapers, no television. Your understanding of the world is incredibly localized, limited to your village in the immediate surrounding area. What little you know of the outside world is filtered through rumor, superstition, and the teachings of the church. This intellectual isolation would be profoundly unsettling for your modern mind, accustomed to instant access to vast amounts of information. You'd ask a question, and the answer might take weeks to arrive, if it ever did. Historians still argue whether the common folk genuinely believed every single miracle and prophecy propagated by the church, or if there was a subtle undercurrent of skepticism born from their harsh daily realities. But, belief or not, you adhered because questioning meant trouble. As the day begins to wane, you're acutely aware of the fading light. There's no street lighting, no lamps in every room. Once the sun sets, your world shrinks to the radius of a sputtering candle or a small hearth fire. The darkness is absolute, a thick, palpable presence that forces you to rely on your other senses, sharpened by necessity. You'd move by memory, by the familiar sounds of your home. Entertainment, beyond storytelling around the fire, would be minimal. No movies, no music streaming, no video games. You'd probably spend the evening praying, perhaps mending clothes, or simply sitting in quiet contemplation, your mind free to wander, often towards the anxieties of survival. You'd quickly find that boredom, as you know it, is a luxury. Your time is consumed by the sheer necessities of staying alive. It's a relentless cycle, a primal struggle that would leave your modern self utterly bewildered and thoroughly exhausted by the end of this second, very long day. As the pale light of dawn once again bleeds into your cramped, smoky dwelling, you feel a familiar ache in your bones. It's a persistent, dull throb that has become your constant companion. Your muscles, still protesting from yesterday's toil in the fields, and let's be honest, you're still not quite getting the hang of that medieval plow. You're more likely to plow your own foot, are stiff and unwilling. You swing your legs over the side of the straw mattress, the rustle a tiny, annoying orchestra beneath you. Your body smells authentically medieval. That is, your modern nose, used to the comforting scent of soap and fabric softener, is now fully accustomed to the earthy, musky, slightly acrid aroma of constant proximity to animals and humans who rarely bathe. Today, you're likely to be put to work on the Lord's domain, his personal land, as part of your feudal obligations. This isn't optional, it's part of the deal. You get to live on his land in exchange for labor, crops, and fealty. So, you trudge out into the morning mist, your stomach rumbling. Breakfast, if you even have it, is likely more stale bread and whatever watery pottage was left over from last night. It's monotonous, bland, and barely provides the energy you need for the grueling day ahead. You pass by other villagers, their faces etched with the same weariness, their movements slow and deliberate. There are no bright morning greetings, no cheerful chatter about weekend plans. Life is too hard, too demanding for such frivolity. The work begins. If it's spring, you might be tilling or sowing. Summer, weeding or harvesting. Autumn, threshing or preparing for winter. And if winter, cutting wood, repairing tools, or engaging in other necessary tasks to simply survive. The cold. The tools are heavy, inefficient, and often crudely made. The plow is a wooden monstrosity, requiring immense strength to pull through the stubborn earth. The scythe, a razor-sharp blade attached to a long handle, is notoriously difficult to master without slicing off a finger or worse. You'd quickly realize that all those YouTube videos about historical crafts make it look far easier than it actually is. Your hands are already a mess of blisters, calluses, and small cuts from previous days. Every small injury is a potential pathway for infection. And you know, with a chilling certainty, that infection could mean a slow, painful death. There's no first aid kit here, no quick swab of antiseptic. You might spit on it, or apply a questionable herbal poultice that may or may not do anything. Your companions in labor are equally exhausted. There's little conversation beyond essential commands or grunts of effort. Everyone is focused on the task at hand, driven by the immediate need to produce enough food to survive the next season. There are no breaks, no lunch hour, no water cooler gossip. You work until your muscles give out or until the sun dips below the horizon. The sun is your clock, the seasons your calendar. Forget about weekends or holidays. But your days off are dictated by religious feast days, and even those might involve mandatory church attendance and communal duties. You're not just an individual. You're a cog in a vast agricultural machine, bound by tradition, obligation, and the unrelenting cycle of nature. The lack of technology is truly profound. Every single item you use, from your rudimentary tools to your woven clothes, is produced by hand, by someone just like you, with immense effort. There are no factories, no mass production. Even simple repairs take time and specialized skills. If your plow breaks, you need a blacksmith. If your tunic tears, you need someone to mend it. Or you mend it yourself with clumsy fingers and rough thread. This makes everything valuable, and everything a source of potential delay and hardship if it breaks or is lost. Imagine trying to fix your smartphone with a hammer and a prayer. That's essentially the technological level you're operating at. You can't just order a replacement. You wait, you make do, or you go without. As you pause for a moment, wiping sweat from your brow with a grimy hand, you might glance around at the landscape. It's not the pristine, manicured countryside you might see in modern photographs. It's a patchwork of fields, some cultivated, some fallow, dotted with small, struggling villages. Forests loom large, dark, and mysterious, full of wild animals, and perhaps rumored outlaws. The sense of isolation is palpable. Travel beyond your immediate region is rare and dangerous, so your world is incredibly small. You know everyone in your village, their quirks, their history, their lineage. Your identity is deeply intertwined with this small community. There's no anonymity, no escaping your past or your reputation. If you've ever thought about running away to join the circus, medievally speaking, that circus would likely be a traveling band of beggars and con artists, and your chances of survival would plummet even further. Even the concept of time is different. There are no precise clocks. Time is measured by the sun, by church bells, by the rhythm of daily tasks. The idea of being on time for an appointment is laughable. You simply arrive when you arrive, when the work is done, or when the light permits. This slower, more organic rhythm of life might sound appealing in theory, a way to escape the frantic pace of modern existence, but in practice, it's not peaceful. It's dictated by necessity and lack of precise measurement. Your biological clock would be completely reset, attuned to the rising and setting of the sun, and the growl of your stomach. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky with colors that you're too tired to truly appreciate, the last rays illuminate your calloused hands and aching back. You feel utterly drained, physically and mentally. The constant struggle for survival leaves little room for contemplation or higher thought. Your worries are immediate: food for tomorrow, warmth for tonight, avoiding illness. Your dreams are basic: a full stomach, a dry roof, a healthy family. The simple pleasures of medieval life, like a good ale or a lively story by the fire, are cherished precisely because they are so rare and hard-won. As you trudge back towards your smoky hut, you're reminded that the beauty of nature, the wonder of existence, is often overshadowed by the brutal demands of staying alive. And if you're still thinking about a romantic medieval wedding, remember that the rings probably came from a guy who also pulled teeth, and the feast included a lot of very tough unidentifiable meat. You sink onto your straw mattress. The rustle, a familiar lullaby of tiny creatures. The darkness outside is absolute, a thick, suffocating blanket, broken only by the dim glow of your hearth fire. Sleep comes, but it's not restorative. It's fitful, punctuated by aches and a subconscious hum of anxiety that never truly leaves you. You'd wake up frequently, shivering from the cold, or disturbed by a noise, only to drift back into an uneasy slumber. Your body is perpetually in survival mode, always on edge. You're learning, day by grueling day, that the romanticized image of knights and castles is just a thin veneer over a reality that is far more challenging, far more uncomfortable, and far more dangerous than you could have ever imagined. The sweet relief of sleep, a true escape, remains just out of reach, another luxury of your previous life. Waking up this morning, your muscles scream in protest, a chorus of deep, persistent aches you've grown accustomed to. It's a pain that settles into your bones, a constant reminder of the physical toll of medieval life. You're beginning to understand that rest here means little more than ceasing active labor. Your body is never truly relaxed, never fully recovered. The straw beneath you seems to have hardened overnight, and the air bites with a familiar chill. As you stumble out of bed, your stomach gives a familiar grumble, a deep, empty sound that seems to mock your modern concept of breakfast. Forget your carefully balanced diet of whole grains and protein. Here, it's about calorie intake, whatever you can get to fuel the relentless labor. Today, let's consider the social structures that bind you, or rather, the chains that hold you. You're a serf, a peasant, tied to the land, beholden to your Lord. You don't own the land you work. You merely have the right to live and farm on it in exchange for your labor, loyalty, and a portion of your harvest. This is the feudal system, a rigid hierarchy that dictates every aspect of your existence. There's no social mobility. You were born into this station, and your children will be born into it too. The idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is a foreign concept. The bootstraps don't even exist, and if they did, they'd be too stiff to pull. You can't leave the manor without your lord's permission, which is rarely granted. Your entire world is circumscribed by the boundaries of his land. Think of it as a very large, very muddy, very inescapable open-air prison. But you're also responsible for growing your own food. Your lord, residing in his stone castle or fortified manor house, is the law. He administers justice, settles disputes, and commands your military service if he calls upon it. His word is essentially gospel. While he has obligations to protect you and provide a semblance of order, his interests are primarily his own. Justice is often brutal and swift. Petty theft might result in public flogging or the loss of a hand. More serious crimes could mean hanging. There are no appeals processes, no long trials with lawyers. Judgment is often delivered by the Lord or his bailiff, based on custom, testimony, and sometimes, trial by ordeal, like holding a hot iron or being thrown into water to prove guilt or innocence. Your modern legal mind, accustomed to due process and human rights, would reel in horror. The concept of innocent until proven guilty is often inverted. You're guilty until you can prove otherwise, and the methods of proof are terrifyingly crude. Historians still argue whether trials by ordeal were genuinely believed to reveal divine judgment, or if they served more as psychological tools for social control and intimidation. Then there's the sheer lack of privacy and personal freedom that we touched upon earlier. Your life is an open book. Everyone knows everyone else's business. There are no secrets in a small medieval village. Your actions, your words, your family life, all are under constant scrutiny. This lack of anonymity, while fostering a strong sense of community, also means that social pressures and conformity are immense. Deviate too much, speak out of turn, or question authority, and you risk not only your standing, but your very survival. The communal bath, the shared cooking facilities, the single-room dwelling, all contribute to a life lived in constant proximity, with little to no personal space. You'd quickly find your inner introvert screaming for a secluded corner, but there isn't one. Your only solitude would be a brief moment behind a bush, and even then, you'd be acutely aware of who might be watching. The role of women in medieval society is particularly stark. For most women, life revolved around domestic duties, childbearing, and agricultural labor alongside men. While women could hold certain positions in craft guilds or run businesses, their legal rights were often limited. Property usually passed through the male line, and a woman's status was often defined by her relationship to a man as a daughter, wife, or a widow. Marriage was often a practical arrangement, an alliance between families or a means of securing labor and heirs, rather than a matter of romantic love. Women's bodies were constantly at risk, particularly due to the dangers of childbirth. The modern notion of gender equality is completely absent. Instead, a strict patriarchal structure governs most aspects of life. Even your spiritual life is controlled. The Church, whether Catholic in Western Europe or Orthodox in Eastern Europe, is an omnipresent, pervasive force. It dictates morality, offers salvation, or threatens damnation, and provides the framework for understanding the world. You attend Mass regularly, participate in religious festivals, and contribute tithes a portion of your produce or income to the Church. Failure to conform to religious doctrine could lead to ostracism, or worse, accusations of heresy. The fear of eternal damnation is a powerful motivator, shaping daily behavior and choices. There's no separation of church and state. The two are deeply intertwined with religious authority, often reinforcing secular power. This constant religious oversight would feel stifling to your modern, secularized sensibilities. You couldn't just opt out of religious practice. It was woven into the very fabric of society. You would quickly learn how to cross yourself, or at least fake it convincingly, as the sun arcs across the sky, marking the passage of another laborious day. You might find yourself dwelling on the sheer boredom of it all. Your modern life is filled with endless stimulation. News, entertainment, social media, hobbies. Here the days blend into one another, marked only by the rhythm of the seasons and the demands of survival. There's little intellectual engagement beyond practical knowledge. The few stories you hear are old ones, repeated countless times. The only news is local gossip or the occasional pronouncement from the Lord. Your mind, accustomed to constant input and novelty, would feel starved, unstimulated, and eventually dulled. You'd find yourself staring at a patch of mud, contemplating the philosophical implications of a particularly stubborn weed, just to keep your brain active. As dusk approaches, bringing with it the familiar chill and the promise of another fitful night, you trudge back to your dwelling. The air is heavy with the scent of wood smoke, mingling with the aroma of simmering pottage from various hearths. Your stomach rumbles, and you dream of a meal that isn't bland and repetitive. You dream of meat, of spices, of something, anything, different, but you know it won't happen. The food is functional, meant to sustain, not to delight. And as you gather around the fire, sharing what little food you have, the conversation is sparse. Often about the weather, the crops, or the latest village rumor. There's no escaping the reality of your existence. You are a small cog in a vast, unchanging machine, and your life, from birth to death, is largely predetermined. It's a humbling and frankly terrifying realization for someone accustomed to boundless choice and personal agency. The simple comfort of a warm fire, the brief warmth of human connection, becomes your only solace in a world that constantly grinds you down. As the embers dim and the darkness outside deepens, you curl up on your straw bed, your body aching, your mind weary. The silence, broken only by the quiet breathing of your family and the occasional rustle of unseen life settles over you. There are no dreams of grandeur, no aspirations of changing the world, only the hope for another sunrise, another chance to endure, to survive. This is the bedrock reality of medieval existence, and you're living it. Whether you like it or not, you stir, not from the sound of birdsong or an alarm, but from the raw, pervasive cold that seems to seep directly into your bones. It's a primal cold, one that no layers of rough wool or huddled bodies seem to truly fend off. You shiver, pulling your thin blanket tighter, but it's a futile gesture. Your medieval body, perpetually undernourished and overworked, feels less like your own and more like a vessel for constant discomfort. As you slowly rise, the morning light, still weak and gray, illuminates the dust motes dancing in the smoky air of your hovel. You cough, a dry, rasping sound, your throat still raw from the previous night's chill and the ever-present smoke from the hearth. Your body is a symphony of aches and stiffness. Every joint seems to protest the simple act of movement. Today, your tasks might shift from the fields to the village, or perhaps you're called to assist with a building project. Imagine lifting heavy timbers, hauling stones, or mixing mortar, all by hand with rudimentary tools and no safety equipment whatsoever. A dropped stone could crush a foot. A collapsing timber could mean instant death. There are no hard hats, no steel-toed boots, no liability insurance. If you're injured, you're simply out of commission, a burden on your family, and likely destined for a slow, painful decline. Your modern mind, accustomed to safety regulations and workplace rights, would be in a constant state of low-grade panic. You'd be hyper-aware of every falling object, every precarious stack, every creaking beam. It's enough to make you long for a desk job, even if it's reviewing spreadsheets all day. Let's talk about food again, but from a different angle: preservation and variety, or rather, the lack thereof. You're constantly eating what's in season, or what can be preserved through salting, drying, or fermenting. Fresh fruits and vegetables are seasonal luxuries. Meat, as we've mentioned, is rare, and when you do get it, it's often tough, stringy, and poorly butchered. Spices, which you take for granted, are incredibly expensive, traded along distant routes, and reserved almost exclusively for the wealthy. Your palate would be utterly bored, imagine, eating the same bland, grainy stew, day after day, week after week. Your modern craving for pizza, sushi, or a simple fresh salad would become an agonizing phantom limb, a longing for flavors you can barely remember. You'd probably even miss your least favorite vegetables from your past life. Historians still argue whether the medieval diet, despite its monotony, was actually healthier than some later periods due to its low sugar content and reliance on whole grains. Despite the frequent calorie deficit experienced by the poor, and the water, the water, you'd be perpetually thirsty, but every sip would be a gamble. Rivers and streams, your primary sources, are also where people wash clothes, where animals drink, and where waste is often disposed. Well, water is better, but still susceptible to contamination. So, most people drink ale or wine. You're essentially living in a constant state of mild dehydration or slight inebriation. This isn't for fun. It's a matter of basic survival. Imagine trying to perform complex physical labor or make important decisions while feeling slightly buzzed or perpetually parched. Your efficiency and clarity of thought would be significantly impaired. No wonder medieval problem solving often involved a lot of praying beyond the physical. Consider the constant low-level sensory assault. Smells, as we've exhaustively covered, are overwhelming. But what about the sounds? No headphones, no quiet rooms. You live in a world of constant noise. Animal sounds, bellowing cows, grunting pigs, squawking chickens, barking dogs, human sounds, shouting, crying, singing, the constant hum of conversation. the clang of the blacksmith's hammer, and the ambient sounds of nature, wind, rain, the rustle of leaves. If you live in a town, it's even worse. The din of market cries, cartwheels on cobblestones, church bells ringing out the hours, the clatter of 1,000 activities. Your modern ears, accustomed to periods of relative quiet, would be constantly overloaded. Your brain would be working overtime just to filter out the cacophony. A simple moment of peace and quiet would be a rare and precious gift, almost unheard of. And then there's the lighting at night, or the lack thereof. Once the sun sets, your world becomes incredibly small, limited to the flickering glow of a hearth fire or a single, expensive candle made of tallow. It's no reading by lamplight, no late-night conversations under bright illumination. Your activities are dictated by the sun. You eat, you talk, you prepare for the next day, and then you sleep, all in semi-darkness. This would completely alter your circadian rhythm, forcing you into a sleep pattern dictated by nature. Your eyes, accustomed to bright screens and electric lights, would strain in the perpetual gloom, and you'd likely develop poor night vision over time. The concept of burning the midnight oil simply doesn't exist for the average person. Oil is too precious, and the night is for sleep or for those who plot in secret. Your sense of personal achievement, of working towards a goal or a career, would be profoundly challenged. Your life is defined by the immediate task, the cycle of the seasons, and your role within the manner. There's no promotion, no bonus, no annual review. Your value is based on your ability to work the land and contribute to the Lord's coffers. Any ambition you might have is quickly stifled by the rigid social structure. The idea of finding your purpose or fulfilling your potential would be utterly meaningless. Your purpose is to survive, to reproduce, and to serve. It's a stark, almost brutal simplicity that will crush your modern individualistic spirit. You'd probably try to introduce some innovative farming techniques, only to be met with blank stares or suspicion, because that's not how we do things. As the day draws to a close, and you settle in for another night of cold and discomfort, you're forced to confront the limits of your own resilience. Your romantic notions of medieval life, perhaps fueled by tales of chivalry and grand feasts, have been systematically dismantled, replaced by the grim reality of daily struggle. You've endured the aches, the smells, the hunger, the constant threat of disease and violence. You've grappled with the lack of freedom, the absence of privacy, and the sheer monotony. And you're still here, still surviving, but barely. The sweet, sleepy relief of approaching unconsciousness is your only reward, a brief escape from a reality that constantly demands more than you feel you have to give. The faint scent of distant cooking fires, mingled with the earthy aroma of damp straw, lulls you closer to that much-needed oblivion, where, for a few precious hours, you can forget the itch of your woolen tunic and the gnawing emptiness in your stomach. You wake with a start, not from a dream, but from the sudden, jarring realization that you're still here. The cold is a familiar embrace, the smells of smoke and unwashed bodies, a persistent perfume. Your body, already a catalog of aches, seems to have added a new one overnight, a persistent crick in your neck from the uneven straw pillow. Perhaps, as you rub the sleep from your eyes, you're reminded that your vision might not be as sharp as it once was. The constant dimness and strain on your eyes from manual tasks without proper light would take their toll. You'd probably be squinting a lot. Today, let's consider the pervasive role of religion in medieval life. The church is not just a building, it's the very fabric of society, dictating not just your spiritual beliefs, but your calendar, your morals, and your understanding of the universe. Every day has a saint's day, every season a religious festival. The ringing of church bells dictates the hours of the day, signaling times for prayer and work. Your life is framed by religious rituals, baptism, confession, communion, marriage, last rites. You don't just believe in God, You live in God's world, a world where divine intervention is seen in every harvest, every sickness, every victory, and every defeat. There's no agnosticism, no atheism, no personal spiritual journey outside the rigid framework of the church. Questioning doctrine is heresy, and heresy is a terrifying prospect. It's potentially leading to excommunication, damnation in the afterlife, or even execution. Your modern freedom of thought and belief would be a dangerous liability here. You'd probably become a very devout, if slightly cynical, churchgoer out of sheer self-preservation. The church also serves as a central social institution. It provides what little education exists mostly for clerics, offers charity to the poor, though often sparingly, and acts as a repository of knowledge and history. Monasteries are centers of learning, preserving texts and copying manuscripts by hand, the medieval equivalent of a university and a library rolled into one, albeit with extremely limited access. This means that knowledge is highly controlled and disseminated. What you learn about the world beyond your immediate village comes from the pulpit or from traveling merchants and pilgrims, often embellished with superstitions and rumors. Concept of scientific inquiry, driven by experimentation and observation, still in its infancy, often viewed with suspicion if it contradicted religious dogma. You'd quickly learn to nod along, smile, and never ask too many probing questions about why God made the world exactly 6,000 years ago, or why the earth is demonstrably flat. Let's shift to conflict and warfare. While the medieval period isn't one continuous battle, warfare is a constant specter. Lords squabble over land, kings fight for power, and crusades are launched against distant enemies. And if you're a peasant, you're often caught in the middle. Your village might be pillaged, your crops burned, your family displaced. You might even be conscripted into your lord's army, armed with a crude spear or a bow, and sent off to fight battles you don't understand for causes that mean nothing to you. There's no proper military training as you know it, no professional army, just a levy of peasants and a corps of knights and men-at-arms. Combat is brutal, personal, and terrifying. Swords, axes, spears, and maces are used at close quarters. Injuries. Our horrific retreat often means being cut down from behind. The psychological trauma of witnessing such violence would be immense, leaving you with lasting scars. There's no PTSD diagnosis, no counseling, just the grim reality of having to move on and survive. Historians still argue whether the concept of chivalry, so prevalent in medieval literature, truly reflected the lived experience of knights, or if it was largely an idealized construct designed to romanticize brutality. Even if you're not directly involved in combat, the threat of it hangs over everything. Fortifications, castles, city walls are ever-present reminders of the need for defense. Your own small village might have a palisade, a ditch, or simply a collection of hovels built close together for mutual protection. You'd live with a constant low-level hum of anxiety, a primal fear of the unknown approaching over the horizon. Every distant drumbeat, every group of unfamiliar riders could signal disaster. This pervasive insecurity would mean you'd always be on guard, never fully relaxed, never truly safe. Your modern sense of security, built on stable governments and international laws, would feel like an impossible dream. Consider the role of public entertainment and recreation. It's not Netflix and chill. Your entertainment is mostly communal and often tied to religious festivals or market days. There might be traveling minstrels who sing ballads of heroic deeds, or jesters who perform crude comedy. Public executions or punishments are common spectacles, serving as both deterrence and morbid entertainment. Beer baiting and cockfighting are popular pastimes. Storytelling around the fire is a cherished activity, where tales of saints, devils, and ancient heroes are passed down through generations. Sports are often rough and dangerous, involving large groups and minimal rules. Think early forms. A football that resemble a chaotic brawl. Your sophisticated taste for nuanced narratives or complex musical compositions would find little satisfaction here. You'd be stuck watching two dogs fight a bear, and maybe you'd even find yourself cheering as the day yields to the lengthening shadows, and the familiar scent of wood smoke fills the air. You find yourself utterly exhausted. The constant mental and physical strain of survival, the pervasive fear, the stifling social and religious strictures, all combine to create a relentless pressure. Your modern psyche, accustomed to comfort and freedom, would be stretched to its breaking point. You'd yearn for the simplest things: a hot shower, a quiet room, a book, reliable source of information, a meal with more than two flavors. But these are luxuries from a world that doesn't exist here. As you settle onto your straw bed, the sounds of the night, the distant howl of a wolf, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of unseen rodents become your lullaby. Your dreams, if they come, are likely of something simple, something clean, something safe, perhaps a soft, fluffy pillow. You might even dream of a fully functioning modern toilet, which, let's be honest, is a truly medieval aspiration. You drift off, praying for a brief respite from the unending struggle. The dawn arrives with its usual stark chill, a reminder that your body, despite its valiant efforts, is still thoroughly medievalized. Every morning brings a fresh appreciation for the sheer density of your aches and the pervasive underlying fatigue. You've settled into a grim routine, a rhythm dictated by the sun and the demands of subsistence. But that doesn't make it any less draining. Your rough wool tunic feels like a second, perpetually itchy skin, and the damp earth underfoot seems to transmit its cold directly into your bones. Today, let's consider the challenges of communication and travel. Imagine needing to send a message to a relative in a village just a day's journey away. There's no postal service, no telephone, no internet. You either have to go yourself, which takes you away from vital labor, or you rely on a passing merchant, pilgrim, or traveler, hoping they are trustworthy enough to deliver your message. Information travels at the speed of a walking horse or a human messenger. News of major events, like a battle or a plague outbreak, could take weeks or even months to reach distant regions. This isolation, this slow crawl of information, profoundly shapes your understanding of the world. Your frame of reference is incredibly local, shaped by what you see, hear, and experience within a small radius. The modern concept of global awareness simply doesn't exist. You wouldn't even know if your favorite medieval YouTube channel had uploaded a new video, unless a bard sang about it in your village square. And when you do travel, it's an ordeal. Roads are often little more than muddy tracks, deeply rutted by cartwheels and eroded by rain. Bridges are rare, often poorly maintained or non-existent, forcing you to ford rivers. A simple journey of a few miles can take hours, fraught with peril. There are no road signs, no maps as you understand them, unless you're a cartographer for a king, which you are decidedly not. You navigate by landmarks, by local knowledge, and by asking directions from people who might be suspicious of strangers. Bandits are a very real threat, lurking in forests and desolate stretches. Even the weather is an enemy. A sudden downpour can turn a passable track into an impassable bog, stranding you for days. You'd need to carry your own food, water, and perhaps a weapon for defense. There are no inns on every corner, and those that exist might be unsavory or unsafe. Historians still argue whether the perceived danger of medieval travel was statistically higher than, say, traveling in the Wild West, or if the lack of infrastructure simply made every journey feel more perilous. Consider the lack of sanitation in medieval towns. If you venture into a larger settlement, you're confronted with a new level of environmental assault. Streets are open sewers, filled with human and animal waste, offal from butchers in general. refuse. Diseases spread rapidly in such conditions. Overcrowding is common, and ventilation is poor. The air is thick with the stench of decay, smoke, and unwashed bodies. Even the grandest castles, despite their impressive stone walls, often suffered from poor hygiene, with moats sometimes serving as open latrines and refuse pits. Imagine walking through this day after day, trying to conduct your business while dodging piles of excrement and breathing in disease-laden air. Your modern immune system, coddled by vaccinations and antibiotics, would quickly be overwhelmed. Let's talk about money and the economy. For most peasants, actual coinage is rare. You mostly operate on a barter system, exchanging your labor or your produce for goods and services. When money is involved, it's typically silver or gold coins, often varying in value and purity depending on who minted them. There's no standardized currency, no easy way to check exchange rates. Usury lending money with interest is often frowned upon or even forbidden by the church, which complicates commerce and investment. Guilds control trades, setting prices, regulating quality, and limiting competition. If you have a skill, you must join a guild, abide by its rules, and work your way up from apprentice to journeyman to master, a process that could take decades. Your entrepreneurial spirit would find itself severely constrained. You couldn't just open a pop-up shop. You'd need years of training, a master's approval, and the blessing of the local guild. The lack of accurate timekeeping is another subtle disorienter. Beyond the church bells marking the hours of prayer, there are no personal clocks, no precise schedules. Meetings are held at dawn or at Vespers evening prayer, leaving much to interpretation. This would deeply frustrate your modern need for punctuality and efficiency. You'd spend a lot of time waiting or rushing, unsure if you were early or late. Life moves at a slower, more organic pace, but it's not a leisurely one, It's simply less precise, less organized by artificial constructs of time. This would probably make your medieval self constantly anxious about missing something important, like the last bit of ale before the barrel runs dry. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the muddy tracks, you feel the familiar exhaustion wash over you. Your body aches, your mind is weary from the constant vigilance required to simply navigate this world. You yearn for the simple clarity of a digital clock, the instantaneous connection of a phone call, the clean, smooth surface of a paved road. These are not just conveniences. They are profound differences in how you experience and interact with the world. Here, every message delivered, every journey completed, every transaction made is an achievement born of immense effort and fraught with risk. As you return to your cold, smoky dwelling, the familiar smells and sounds envelop you. The meager meal of pottage feels heavier in your stomach, not because it's rich, but because your body is simply too tired to digest it efficiently. You contemplate the coming night, the absolute darkness outside your door, and the fragile barrier your small hut provides against the elements and the unknown. You're learning, day by day, to appreciate the smallest comforts, the warmth of a flickering fire, the shared breath of your family, the momentary lull in the constant struggle. These small victories are all you have as you finally lay down on your straw. The distant cry of a night animal underscores the profound wildness of this world, a wildness that permeates every aspect of your medieval existence, reminding you that you are merely a small, vulnerable part of a vast, unforgiving natural order. The deep, dark quiet of the night eventually pulls you down into a troubled sleep. The morning light, or what passes for it, filtering through the grime-streaked window, finds you still in the clutches of a restless sleep. When you finally stir, it's not with the sudden jolt of an alarm, but a slow, gradual surfacing from the depths of fatigue. Every joint in your body seems to emit a low groan of protest, a symphony of medieval wear and tear. Your tongue feels thick, your mouth dry, and the familiar, underlying hunger pangs are a constant companion. As you pull on your rough wool garments, you might notice a fresh tear or a new fray in the fabric. Another small battle lost to the relentless grind of daily life. Today, let's consider the environment and your relationship with it. You are living in a world profoundly shaped by the elements, a world where nature is both provider and merciless adversary. Forests are vast and untamed essential sources of timber and fuel, but also home to dangerous wild animals like wolves, bears, and boars. You walk through these forests with a constant awareness of peril, not with the carefree abandon of a modern hiker. Rivers, while vital for water and travel, can flood unpredictably, destroying crops and villages. The land itself is unforgiving. Heavy clay soils, rocky outcrops, and thin topsoil make farming a constant battle. Your efforts to cultivate the land are often hampered by the weather, too much rain, too little rain, a sudden frost. You are utterly dependent on the whims of nature. With none of the large-scale irrigation systems, flood controls, or resilient crop varieties that buffer modern agriculture, historians still argue whether medieval land management practices, such as the three-field system, were truly sustainable in the long term, or merely a way to maximize output in an inherently challenging environment. As the day yields to the lengthening shadows, and the familiar scent of wood smoke fills the air, you find yourself utterly exhausted. The constant mental and physical strain of survival, the pervasive fear, the stifling social and religious strictures, all combine to create a relentless pressure. Your modern psyche, accustomed to comfort and freedom, would be stretched to its breaking point. You'd yearn for the simplest things: a hot shower, a quiet room, a book, reliable source of information, a meal with more than two flavors. But these are luxuries from a world that doesn't exist here. As you settle onto your straw bed, the sounds of the night, the distant howl of a wolf, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of unseen rodents become your lullaby. Your dreams, if they come, are likely of something simple, something clean, something safe, perhaps a soft, fluffy pillow. You might even dream of a fully functioning modern toilet, which, let's be honest, is a truly medieval aspiration. You drift off, praying for a brief respite from the unending struggle. The dawn arrives with its usual stark chill, a reminder that your body, despite its valiant efforts, is still thoroughly medievalized. Every morning brings a fresh appreciation for the sheer density of your aches and the pervasive underlying fatigue. You've settled into a grim routine, a rhythm dictated by the sun and the demands of subsistence. But that doesn't make it any less draining. Your rough wool tunic feels like a second, perpetually itchy skin, and the damp earth underfoot seems to transmit its cold directly into your bones. Today, let's consider the challenges of communication and travel. Imagine needing to send a message to a relative in a village just a day's journey away. There's no postal service, no telephone, no internet. You either have to go yourself, which takes you away from vital labor, or you rely on a passing merchant, pilgrim, or traveler, hoping they are trustworthy enough to deliver your message. Information travels at the speed of a walking horse or a human messenger. News of major events, like a battle or a plague outbreak, could take weeks or even months to reach distant regions. This isolation, this slow crawl of information, profoundly shapes your understanding of the world. Your frame of reference is incredibly local, shaped by what you see, hear, and experience within a small radius. The modern concept of global awareness simply doesn't exist. You wouldn't even know if your favorite medieval YouTube channel had uploaded a new video unless a bard sang about it in your village square. And when you do travel, it's an ordeal. Roads are often little more than muddy tracks, deeply rutted by cartwheels and eroded by rain. Bridges are rare, often poorly maintained or non-existent, forcing you to ford rivers. A simple journey of a few miles can take hours, fraught with peril. There are no road signs, no maps as you understand them, unless you're a cartographer for a king, which you are decidedly not. You navigate by landmarks, by local knowledge, and by asking directions from people who might be suspicious of strangers. Bandits are a very real threat, lurking in forests and desolate stretches. Even the weather is an enemy. A sudden downpour can turn a passable track into an impassable bog, stranding you for days. You'd need to carry your own food, water, and perhaps a weapon for defense. There are no inns on every corner, and those that exist might be unsavory or unsafe. Historians still argue whether the perceived danger of medieval travel was statistically higher than, say, traveling in the Wild West, or if the lack of infrastructure simply made every journey feel more perilous. Consider the lack of sanitation in medieval towns. If you venture into a larger settlement, you're confronted with a new level of environmental assault. Streets are open sewers, filled with human and animal waste, offal from butchers and general refuse. Diseases spread rapidly in such conditions. Overcrowding is common, and ventilation is poor. The air is thick with the stench of decay, smoke, and unwashed bodies. Even the grandest castles, despite their impressive stone walls, often suffered from poor hygiene, with moats sometimes serving as open latrines and refuse pits. Imagine walking through this day after day, trying to conduct your business while dodging piles of excrement and breathing in disease-laden air. Your modern immune system, coddled by vaccinations and antibiotics, would quickly be overwhelmed. Let's talk about money and the economy. For most peasants, actual coinage is rare. You mostly operate on a barter system, exchanging your labor or your produce for goods and services. When money is involved, it's typically silver or gold coins, often varying in value and purity depending on who minted them. There's no standardized currency, no easy way to check exchange rates. Usury lending money with interest is often frowned upon or even forbidden by the church, which complicates commerce and investment. Guilds control trades, setting prices, regulating quality, and limiting competition. If you have a skill, you must join a guild, abide by its rules, and work your way up from apprentice to journeyman to master, a process that could take decades. Your entrepreneurial spirit would find itself severely constrained. You couldn't just open a pop-up shop. You'd need years of training, a master's approval, and the blessing of the local guild. The lack of accurate timekeeping is another subtle disorienter. Beyond the church bells marking the hours of prayer, there are no personal clocks, no precise schedules. Meetings are held at dawn or at Vespers evening prayer, leaving much to interpretation. This would deeply frustrate your modern need for punctuality and efficiency. You'd spend a lot of time waiting or rushing, unsure if you were early or late. Life moves at a slower, more organic pace, but it's not a leisurely one, It's simply less precise, less organized by artificial constructs of time. This would probably make your medieval self constantly anxious about missing something important, like the last bit of ale before the barrel runs dry. As the sun dips below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the muddy tracks, you feel the familiar exhaustion wash over you. Your body aches, your mind is weary from the constant vigilance required to simply navigate this world. You yearn for the simple clarity of a digital clock, the instantaneous connection of a phone call, the clean, smooth surface of a paved road. These are not just conveniences. They are profound differences in how you experience and interact with the world. Here, every message delivered, every journey completed, every transaction made is an achievement born of immense effort and fraught with risk. As you return to your cold, smoky dwelling, the familiar smells and sounds envelop you. The meager meal of pottage feels heavier in your stomach, not because it's rich, but because your body is simply too tired to digest it efficiently. You contemplate the coming night, the absolute darkness outside your door, and the fragile barrier your small hut provides against the elements and the unknown. You're learning, day by day, to appreciate the smallest comforts, the warmth of a flickering fire, the shared breath of your family, the momentary lull in the constant struggle. These small victories are all you have as you finally lay down on your straw. The distant cry of a night animal underscores the profound wildness of this world, a wildness that permeates every aspect of your medieval existence, reminding you that you are merely a small, vulnerable part of a vast, unforgiving natural order. The deep, dark quiet of the night eventually pulls you down into a troubled sleep. The morning light, or what passes for it, filtering through the grime-streaked window, finds you still in the clutches of a restless sleep. When you finally stir, it's not with the sudden jolt of an alarm, but a slow, gradual surfacing from the depths of fatigue. Every joint in your body seems to emit a low groan of protest, a symphony of medieval wear and tear. Your tongue feels thick, your mouth dry, and the familiar, underlying hunger pangs are a constant companion. As you pull on your rough wool garments, you might notice a fresh tear or a new fray in the fabric. Another small battle lost to the relentless grind of daily life. Today, let's consider the environment and your relationship with it. You are living in a world profoundly shaped by the elements, a world where nature is both provider and merciless adversary. Forests are vast and untamed essential sources of timber and fuel, but also home to dangerous wild animals like wolves, bears, and boars. You walk through these forests with a constant awareness of peril, not with the carefree abandon of a modern hiker. Rivers, while vital for water and travel, can flood unpredictably, destroying crops and villages. The land itself is unforgiving. Heavy clay soils, rocky outcrops, and thin topsoil make farming a constant battle. Your efforts to cultivate the land are often hampered by the weather, too much rain, too little rain, a sudden frost. You are utterly dependent on the whims of nature. With none of the large-scale irrigation systems, flood controls, or resilient crop varieties that buffer modern agriculture, historians still argue whether medieval land management practices, such as the three-field system, were truly sustainable in the long term, or merely a way to maximize output in an inherently challenging environment. The lack of personal aspiration is another crushing blow to your modern spirit. For most, your future is largely predetermined by your birth. You will likely live and die in the same village, doing the same work as your parents. There's no career ladder, no higher education to strive for, no global travel for self-discovery. Your dreams, if you dare to have them, are simple: a healthy family, a good harvest, enough food to eat. This would profoundly challenge your modern concept of purpose and ambition. You'd likely feel trapped, your potential stifled, your spirit slowly eroded by the weight of inevitability. He might even try to start a medieval self-help podcast, but it would mostly just be you whispering into a bucket, hoping someone somewhere might hear it. Just pull yourself up by your rough, itchy wool bootstraps. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky with colors you're too tired to truly appreciate, you feel the familiar exhaustion wash over you. Your body aches, your mind is weary from the constant vigilance required to simply navigate this world. You yearn for the simplest things: a hot shower, a quiet room, a book, a reliable source of information, a meal with more than 2 flavors. But these are luxuries from a world that doesn't exist here. Every day is a test, every moment a reminder of your vulnerability. You've learned that the romanticized image of medieval life is a cruel deception. The reality is a relentless grind of discomfort, danger, and limitations as you settle onto your straw bed. The sounds of the night, the distant cry of a night animal, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of unseen rodents become your lullaby. The deep, absolute darkness presses in from outside, making the flickering light of your hearth fire a beacon of desperate comfort. You are a small, fragile human in a vast, unpredictable, and often terrifying world. You drift off, pulling your rough blanket tighter, hoping for a few hours of uneasy sleep, a brief escape from the never-ending medieval reality. Your dreams, if they come, are simple: warmth, silence, and perhaps, just perhaps, the distant echo of a flushing toilet. The last thing you hear before you truly drift off is the constant, low hum of anxiety that medieval life seems to carry. It's a persistent whisper that settles deep into your subconscious. Another dawn. You wake, not because you were rested, but because the cold simply doesn't allow for prolonged comfort. Your body, now a familiar landscape of aches and stiffness, protests with every small movement. The rough wool of your tunic feels like sandpaper against your skin, and the ever-present itch of fleas and lice is a dull background hum to your morning. As you step outside your dwelling, the air bites with a familiar chill, and the ground beneath your bare feet or thinly soled shoes is cold and damp. Your senses are assaulted by the usual medieval medley of smells: wood smoke, human waste, animal musk, and the faint, sweet decay of refuse. You're becoming accustomed to it, a troubling sign of your medievalization. Let's expand on the concept of, and more. While the medieval period offers a rich tapestry of challenges, similar, fundamental human struggles permeate other historical epochs. Imagine, for a moment, that your journey continues not in the same medieval village, but in a burgeoning industrial city of the late 18th or early 19th century. You've traded the open fields for cramped, sooty tenements, and the rhythm of the seasons for the relentless clang and hiss of machinery. The air is thick, not just with wood smoke, but with the acrid fumes of coal and industrial waste. Your lungs, already weakened by medieval conditions, would now contend with a new, equally insidious enemy: pollution. Your work has shifted from the agricultural to the mechanical. You're probably working in a factory, a textile mill, a coal mine, and ironworks. The hours are still brutally long, 12 to 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. The conditions are deafening, dangerous, and monotonous. Imagine standing at a loom for endless hours, the constant roar of the machinery vibrating through your entire body, the air filled with cotton dust that chokes your lungs, or descending into a coal mine, working in cramped, dark, dangerous conditions, with the constant threat of cave-ins, explosions, or black lung disease. There are no safety guards on machinery. Exposed gears and belts mean that a moment's inattention can cost you a limb or your life. Child labor is rampant. You might see children as young as 5 or 6 working alongside adults, their small hands more suited to manipulating delicate machinery parts, their small bodies able to fit into narrow mine shafts. Your modern sensibilities about child protection would be utterly shattered. You'd likely feel an overwhelming sense of helplessness watching these tiny figures toil away, knowing their futures are already determined by the grim realities of this industrial machine. Historians still argue whether the Industrial Revolution, despite its economic advances, has truly improved the quality of life for the working class in its initial phases, or if it simply traded one set of hardships for another. Your dwelling hasn't improved much, if at all. You're living in a cramped, overcrowded tenement, probably sharing a single room with your entire family and possibly another family or two. Sanitation is still abysmal. Open sewers often run through the streets, and clean water is a luxury. Disease, particularly cholera and typhus, sweeps through these crowded, sanitary urban centers with terrifying regularity. The smells are different, but no less offensive. A mixture of industrial waste, coal smoke, human effluvia, and the general reek of poverty. The sense of community you might have found in your medieval village is often replaced by a feeling of anonymity and alienation in the sprawling, impersonal city. You are just one among thousands of interchangeable laborers, easily replaced if you falter. Food is still a struggle, but it's a different kind of struggle. Instead of growing your own, you're reliant on meager wages to buy provisions from markets where food is often adulterated, stale, or low quality. Fresh produce is rare and expensive. Your diet consists of cheap bread, potatoes, and perhaps some fatty meat if you're lucky. Malnutrition remains a pervasive problem, weakening your body and making you more susceptible to illness. Your body, accustomed to the raw, natural diet of the medieval period, would now be struggling with the processed, often contaminated, foodstuffs of the early industrial age. Imagine the stomach upsets, the constant low-level digestive distress as your system tries to cope with the dubious quality of your food. You'd probably find yourself nostalgic for that bland, but at least unprocessed, medieval pottage. The social structure has shifted, but the lack of mobility remains. You are now part of the working class, a proletariat, exploited by factory owners and industrialists. Your hours are long, your wages are low, and any attempt to organize or protest is met with harsh repression. The concept of a trade union is only just beginning to emerge, often violently suppressed. You are economically bound to your factory, your life dictated by the merciless rhythm of the machine, the sheer dehumanization of the factory system, where you are a component in a vast, caring process, would crush your spirit in a new way. You're not just enduring physical hardship, you're enduring a profound spiritual emptiness, a sense of being utterly insignificant. You might try to explain automation to your fellow workers, but they'd just stare at you blankly. It's probably assuming you'd had too much cheap gin, as the ceaseless clang of the factory whistle signals the end of your shift. You emerge into the grimy, smoke-filled twilight. Your body aches with a different kind of pain now. The repetitive strain of machinery, the lung-searing effects of industrial fumes. Your mind is dulled by the monotony, and the sheer hopelessness of your situation presses down on you. You've traded one form of relentless struggle for another, discovering that progress often brings new, unforeseen challenges. As you stumble back to your cramped tenement, the faint, acrid smell of coal smoke seems to follow you, clinging to your clothes and permeating your very being. You yearn for the simple clarity of an open field, the clean air of the countryside, the predictable rhythm of the seasons. But that world is gone, replaced by the relentless, grinding gears of the industrial age. A machine that cares nothing for your comfort, your health, or your aspirations. As you finally collapse onto your hard, lumpy mattress, the sounds of the bustling, grimy city filter through the thin walls, the distant clatter of carts, the drunken shouts from a nearby pub, the persistent coughs of your neighbors. Sleep, when it comes, is a brief, restless oblivion, offering little true respite from the sensory overload and the deep-seated weariness that defines your existence. You drift off, perhaps dreaming of a simpler time, even the hardship of the medieval village, now seeming like a pastoral paradise compared to the relentless, dehumanizing grind of the industrial city. The air outside your window is thick with the scent of soot and despair, a fitting lullaby for your troubled sleep. Another dawn, and your body, perpetually battered, now carries a new kind of fatigue, a dull, pervasive ache that hums beneath your skin. The air in your tenement room is thick with the stale scent of human occupation, cheap coal, smoke, and the faint, unsettling odor of industrial runoff. You pull on your worn, threadbare clothes, now stained with soot and grime, and feel the itch of them against your perpetually irritated skin. Your eyes sting slightly, a perpetual legacy of the polluted air. This is the industrial age, and your romantic notions of progress have been thoroughly disabused. Today, let's consider the pervasive noise, the psychological toll, and the loss of connection to nature. The The noise is constant, a relentless assault on your senses. In your medieval life, you had the sounds of nature, animal calls, and human chatter. Here, in the industrial city, you have the ceaseless clatter of looms, the rhythmic thud of steam hammers, the screech of iron wheels on cobbled streets, the hiss of steam engines, and the general cacophony of thousands of people living and working in close proximity. There is no quiet. Your ears would constantly ring, and your nervous system would be perpetually on edge. This relentless noise pollution, combined with the long hours and poor living conditions, will contribute to a profound sense of exhaustion and irritability. You develop a constant headache, a low thrumming behind your eyes that never quite goes away. The idea of peace and quiet would be a literal dream, a fantasy you can barely conjure in your mind. The psychological toll is immense. You are not just physically exhausted, you are mentally drained. The monotonous, repetitive nature of factory work offers no intellectual stimulation or creative outlet. You perform the same task, hour after hour, day after day, week after week. This would lead to a profound sense of boredom, alienation, and dehumanization. Your sense of purpose, of contributing to something meaningful, would be eroded. You are a cog in a giant machine, easily replaceable. This lack of agency, combined with a constant fear of injury, unemployment, or illness, would foster a deep sense of powerlessness and despair. Depression and anxiety would be rampant, though unrecognized and untreated. People cope with alcohol, with fleeting moments of escapism, or simply by shutting down emotionally. Your modern understanding of mental well-being would find itself in a desperate battle against forces you cannot comprehend. You might even find yourself wishing you were back in the medieval fields. At least then, the monotony was punctuated by the seasons, and your labor felt directly connected to your survival. Historians still argue whether the Industrial Revolution's impact on mental health, particularly for the urban working class, was more profound than the existential fears of the medieval period, or simply a different manifestation of human suffering. Your connection to nature, which was so fundamental in the medieval period, is now almost entirely severed. The sky above your city is often obscured by smoke. The rivers are polluted with industrial waste, and green spaces are few and far between. You no longer live by the rhythm of the seasons. You live by the factory whistle. The sun is just a faint, hazy disk in a perpetually gray sky. This loss of connection to the natural world, coupled with the artificiality and harshness of the urban environment, would create a profound spiritual emptiness. You'd yearn for the sight of a clear night sky, the feel of clean earth beneath your feet, the sound of birdsong that isn't drowned out by the clang of machinery. Even the smell of fresh rain would be tainted by the pervasive aroma of industrial fumes. Let's consider the lack of education and opportunity in this industrial context. While there might be rudimentary charity schools, formal education is still largely inaccessible for the working class. Your children, rather than attending school, are likely working in the factory alongside you, contributing their meager wages to the family's survival. The cycle of poverty and lack of opportunity is self-perpetuating. The idea of social mobility, of improving your station, is a distant dream for most. You were born into the working class, and you will likely die in the working class. Your life, a testament to relentless, often unrewarded labor. Your modern aspirations for your children, their education and future prospects, would be heartbreakingly out of reach here. You might try to teach them to read at night by the dim light of a flickering lamp. But after 12 hours in a factory, their minds, and yours, are too exhausted. The concept of personal time and leisure is still largely non-existent. When you're not working, you're often sleeping, eating, or tending to basic necessities. Any spare time is filled with simple, often coarse forms of entertainment: cheap ale, gambling, street performances, or perhaps a boisterous gathering in a pub. There's little room for hobbies, for self-improvement, for pursuits that enrich the soul. Your life is consumed by the relentless grind of labor and the basic struggle for survival. You'd find yourself longing for the simple medieval pastime of storytelling by the fire, where at least your imagination could wander beyond the confines of your immediate, grimy reality. You might try to invent board games using pebbles and dirt, but your family would probably wonder why you weren't trying to find more food. As the factory whistle blows for the last time today, signaling the end of your shift, you emerge into the twilight, your body aching, your ears ringing, your spirit heavy. The air is thick with smoke and the pervasive smell of industry. You trudge through the crowded, filthy streets, past rows of identical, grim tenements, each window a small, dim eye staring out into the oppressive night. You are just one more anonymous figure in a sea of struggling humanity, enduring a life of relentless toil and profound discomfort. You've traded the open, albeit dangerous, spaces of the medieval world for the suffocating confines of the industrial city, and found that progress often comes with a steep price in human well-being. As you finally collapse onto your hard, lumpy mattress, the persistent cough that has become your constant companion racks your body. The sounds of the city, the shouts, the clatter, the distant hum of machinery, filtered through the thin walls, making true rest elusive. You close your eyes, desperately seeking a brief escape from the ceaseless grind, from the pervasive noise and the crushing weight of your circumstances. You drift off, perhaps dreaming of silence, of clean air, of a world where your labor means more than just a meager wage and a slow, physical decline. The deep, heavy sleep of pure exhaustion eventually pulls you under, but even then, your dreams are probably haunted by the rhythmic clang of the factory. You awaken. If awaken is the right word for your daily transition from unconsciousness to active misery, with a sense of dread. The air in your cramped, sooty room feels heavy, stale, and cold. Your body is a constant tableau of aches and pains, a testament to the relentless physical demands of your industrial life. You've developed a hacking cough, a deep, rattling sound that seems to originate from the very depths of your lungs, a permanent souvenir of the coal-laden air. As you dress in your threadbare, perpetually grimed clothing, you feel the familiar itch of vermin, a constant, low-grade irritation that your modern self would find unbearable today. Let's push the end more further, exploring not just a different period, but the psychological and societal shifts that complicate human survival beyond immediate physical threats. Let's imagine you find yourself in the midst of a grand, global conflict, not medieval skirmishes, but the trench warfare of World War I. You've traded the factory floor for a muddy, rat-infested trench and the relentless noise of machinery for the terrifying cacophony of artillery shells, machine guns, and screams. Your medieval and industrial experiences of physical hardship have prepared you for some of the discomforts, but nothing truly prepares you for this. Your living conditions are unimaginable. You are perpetually cold, wet, and covered in mud. The trench is your home, a narrow ditch carved into the earth, constantly exposed to the elements. Rats, fat and fearless, are your constant companions, feasting on corpses and raiding your meager rations. Lice are rampant, impossible to escape, causing constant itching and discomfort. Sanitation is non-existent. You live among human waste, discarded food, and the decaying bodies of comrades. The smell is a nauseating mix of mud, blood, fear, and cordite. Sleep, if it comes, is fitful and shallow, punctuated by the constant threat of enemy attack or artillery bombardment. You'd probably develop a tic or a stutter just from the sheer nervous strain. The constant threat of death is immediate and overwhelming. It's not a distant plague or an unseen illness. It's a bullet A shell, a bayonet charge. You witness death daily, often in gruesome, dismembering ways. Your comrades are blown apart, drowned in mud, or succumb to gas attacks. The psychological trauma would be immense. Shell shock, or PTSD as it's now known, would be rampant, but it's often dismissed as cowardice or malingering. There's no therapy, no support. You simply endure or you break. The sheer, overwhelming fear, the knowledge that any moment could be your last, would corrode your sanity. Your modern understanding of psychological resilience would be tested to its absolute limit and likely fail. Historians still argue whether the scale of psychological trauma in WWI was unprecedented, or if earlier forms of warfare simply lacked the vocabulary to describe similar widespread mental suffering. The food is monotonous and often inadequate. Bully beef, canned corned beef, biscuits, and perhaps some tea. It's designed for sustenance, not nutrition or enjoyment. Water is often scarce and of questionable quality. You're always hungry, always thirsty, always cold. Your body, already weakened by medieval and industrial hardships, would quickly succumb to trench foot, dysentery, or other diseases exacerbated by malnutrition and unsanitary conditions. Even simple wounds become life-threatening due to infection. In the absence of antibiotics and proper medical care on the front lines, the sheer wastage of life, the seemingly pointless charges into machine gun fire, would ignite a profound sense of futility and despair. Communication with the outside world is incredibly difficult. Letters from home are rare and censored. News from the front is often propaganda designed to maintain morale rather than convey truth. You are isolated, trapped in a muddy, bloody microcosm, with little understanding of the broader conflict or your place within it. Your modern reliance on instant news and global information would be agonizingly unfulfilled. You'd yearn for a simple, uncensored headline or a satellite image to understand the true scale of the horror you're living through. You'd probably try to explain the concept of satellites to your trench mates, only to be told you'd been hit too hard by a shell. The loss of individuality is profound. You are no longer a peasant tied to the land or a factory worker, but a soldier, a number, a piece of cannon fodder. Your identity is subsumed by your uniform, your rank, and your role in the machine of war. Orders are to be obeyed without question, even if they lead to certain death. This complete lack of agency, this stripping away of your personal will, would be crushing to your modern spirit. You're not fighting for a lord, but for abstract concepts of nation and empire. It's concepts that seem meaningless amidst the mud and gore. As the sun, if it even manages to pierce through the perpetual cloud cover, begins to set, the trench becomes a place of deepening gloom. The sounds of battle might lessen, replaced by the chilling cries of the wounded, or the distant, unsettling sounds of enemy activity. You'd huddle with your comrades, sharing a meager cigarette or a flask of dubious liquid, finding solace in the shared misery. There's a camaraderie born of extreme hardship, but it's a fragile bond. It's constantly threatened by the next shell or the next order to go over the top. As you try to sleep, curled up in the damp, muddy trench, the sounds and smells of war permeate your dreams. The distant rumble of artillery, the frantic scratching of rats, the persistent cold, and the knowledge that death could strike at any moment, prevent any true rest. You yearn for the simpler, if still harsh, discomforts of the medieval or industrial age. At least there, you had a roof, however leaky, and a predictable threat. Here, in the trenches, every moment is a roll of the dice with your life. You drift off into a fitful slumber, your mind a maelstrom of fear and exhaustion, wishing for a world where the only explosions were firecrackers. You awaken, or rather, return to consciousness, to the familiar, nauseating cocktail of trench life, damp earth, stale sweat, the cloying sweetness of decay and the metallic temps of blood. Your body, perpetually shivering, feels heavy and leaden, a vessel for an exhaustion so profound it feels less like fatigue and more like a physical substance coating your very soul. Your lungs ache with the familiar, persistent cough, a legacy of previous eras and now exacerbated by the perpetual dampness and the acrid fumes of the battlefield. Your eyes sting, not just from the grime, but from the constant strain of vigilance in the dim, treacherous environment. Today, let's consider the pervasive sense of dread and the extreme dehumanization that reaches its zenith in such conflict zones. You are not merely experiencing discomfort. You are living in a psychological war zone. The sheer number of casualties, the constant sight of mangled bodies, the knowledge that your friends could be gone in an instant, creates a profound sense of existential dread. Life is cheap, and your own existence feels utterly fragile and meaningless. You are expendable, a number on a casualty list. This stripping away of individual value would be crushing to your modern psyche, accustomed to a society that at least theoretically values individual life and well-being. Historians still argue whether the scale of WWI's mass psychology of dehumanization was a new phenomenon or an ancient one amplified by modern technology, leading to an unprecedented disregard for human life. The concept of control is utterly absent. You have no say in your fate, no ability to choose your path. Every movement, every action is dictated by orders from above, orders that often seem suicidal or illogical. You are simply a pawn in a game far larger and more terrifying than you can comprehend. Its profound lack of agency, combined with the constant fear and physical suffering, would lead to feelings of intense helplessness and despair. You'd find yourself simply going through the motions, your will broken, your spirit extinguished. The idea of self-determination would be a bitter joke. You might attempt to argue strategic points with your commanding officer, but you'd probably just end up on latrine duty. Let's also consider the impact of advanced technology, not as a convenience, but as a weapon. Machine guns, artillery, poison gas. These are instruments of death on an unprecedented scale. Your previous experiences with medieval swords or industrial accidents feel almost quaint in comparison. The terror of a gas attack, the agonizing death from suffocation or burns is a new level of horror. The relentless shelling, the thunderous explosions that shake the very earth would shatter your nerves. You're not just fighting other humans, you're fighting the destructive power of human ingenuity turned against itself. The constant drone of distant planes, a new terrifying development, would fill you with a unique dread. You're no longer fighting on a level playing field, but against unseen enemies and overwhelming destructive power. The erosion of personal identity is almost complete. You are known by your uniform, your dog tags, your number. Your individuality is irrelevant. You are part of a collective, a mass of humanity thrown into the maw of war. Your personal history, your aspirations, your dreams, they all melt away in the face of the immediate, overwhelming need to survive. There's no time for reflection, no space for personal growth. You are stripped down to your most primal instincts: fight, flight, or freeze. This would fundamentally change who you are, leaving you a shell of your former self, if you survived at all. The very concept of you as a distinct individual would begin to blur in the aftermath, even if you miraculously survive. It has no easy return to your old life. The physical wounds might heal, but the psychological scars would run deep, often for a lifetime. Society, often unprepared to deal with the trauma of returning soldiers, would offer little solace or support. You'd be left to grapple with the horrors you'd witnessed, the friends you'd lost, the person you'd become, often alone and misunderstood. Your modern expectation of support services for veterans would be a cruel fantasy. You'd likely Find solace in silence, in isolating yourself from those who couldn't understand what you'd endured. As the sun begins its descent, casting long, eerie shadows across the muddy, cratered landscape of no man's land, you feel a profound exhaustion settle over you. It's not just physical, it's a weariness that permeates your very soul. You've endured the raw discomforts of the medieval age, the dehumanizing grind of the industrial city, and now the soul-shattering terror of total war. You've seen humanity at its most vulnerable and at its most destructive. You are utterly, completely drained, your spirit bruised and broken. You yearn for something simple, something clean, something peaceful. A quiet room, a warm bath, a meal that isn't rationed and flavorless, and most of all, silence. A profound, absolute silence, free from the screams, the explosions, and the persistent, gnawing fear as you huddle in the damp, cold trench. The distant rumble of artillery fire becomes your macabre lullaby. The cold seeps into your bones, and the pervasive stench of death and decay fills your nostrils. You close your eyes, desperately seeking oblivion, a brief respite from the relentless horror that surrounds you. Your modern self, utterly stripped bare of its comforts and assumptions, is now just a raw, exposed nerve clinging to the thinnest thread of existence. You drift off into a fitful, nightmare-ridden sleep, hoping against hope for a quick end, or a world where silence is not a luxury, but a given. The only sound is the persistent drumming of fear in your own chest. A heartbeat in a world that has forgotten how to breathe easily. You surface from the depths of a nightmare-haunted sleep, the sounds of battle still echoing in your mind's ear. Your body, perpetually stiff and sore, feels less like your own and more like a collection of protesting joints and strained muscles. The cold, the damp, the stench of the trench, they are all intimately familiar now, a grim comfort in their predictability. You've adapted, in a terrible way, to the continuous horror. Your mind, once sharp and curious, is now dulled by exhaustion and trauma, focused only on immediate survival. The concept of last a day now feels laughably optimistic. You've lasted many, too many days. Let's shift from the battlefield, but continue our journey through profound challenges. Imagine now that you are not a soldier, but a refugee displaced by a natural disaster or a widespread famine. You've survived the physical threats of war, but now you face the insidious, slow burn of hunger, exposure, and forced migration. This is a different kind of endurance test, one that strips away everything but the bare necessities of life. You've traded the acute terror of combat for the grinding, chronic fear of starvation and homelessness. Your journey is on foot for long distances, through unfamiliar and often dangerous landscapes. You carry what little you possess on your back, your belongings reduced to a handful of essentials. There's no infrastructure, no organized relief effort, just endless miles of walking, driven by the desperate hope of finding safety or sustenance. Your feet, already battered by medieval fields and industrial factory floors, are now a mass of blisters and open sores. Each step is an agonizing effort. You'd quickly realize how much you relied on comfortable shoes and paved roads. Historians still argue whether large-scale famines in history were solely products of environmental factors, or if societal structures and political failures played a more significant, exacerbating role. Food is scarce, and what you find is often contaminated or barely edible. You're competing with countless others for meager resources. Hunger is a constant, gnawing sensation, a dull ache that never leaves you. Malnutrition sets in quickly, weakening your body, dulling your mind, and making you incredibly susceptible to disease. Clean water is a luxury. You drink from contaminated sources, knowing it might bring dysentery or cholera. Your stomach, accustomed to the relative abundance and safety of modern food, would be in constant rebellion, struggling with whatever meager, questionable sustenance you managed to procure. you'd probably find yourself eyeing even a half-eaten, mud-covered turnip as if it were a gourmet meal. Exposure to the elements is relentless, yet no proper shelter, no protection from the rain, the wind, or the biting cold nights. Your clothes, already thin and worn, offer little warmth or protection. Hypothermia and heat stroke are constant threats, depending on the climate. You sleep in the open or in makeshift shelters, vulnerable to the elements and to opportunistic predators, both human and animal. Your modern idea of a shelter or a home would seem like an impossible dream, cruel joke in the face of your current reality. The loss of community, or the formation of new, fragile ones, is another profound challenge. You are separated from your family, your friends, your entire social network. You are a stranger in a strange land, relying on the kindness of strangers who often have little to spare. The bonds you form with fellow refugees are born of shared hardship, but they are often temporary and precarious. Trust is hard to come by, and desperation can lead to cruelty. Your modern reliance on social networks, both digital and physical, would feel utterly hollow in the face of such profound isolation. The future is uncertain, a vast, terrifying blank. There's no stability, no planning, no hope for better. Tomorrow, you live hour by hour, day by day, focused only on the immediate need for survival. This lack of a future, this complete absence of hope, would be crushing to your spirit. Your modern ambition, your drive to build a life, would feel utterly meaningless in the face of such overwhelming precarity. You'd find yourself struggling to remember what it felt like to have plans for next week, let alone next year. The erosion of dignity is a subtle yet profound burden. You are reduced to your most basic, primal needs. You beg for food. You scavenge for scraps. You endure humiliation just to survive. Your sense of self-worth, your pride, would be slowly chipped away by the relentless indignities of your situation. This isn't just about physical survival. It's about the survival of your humanity. You'd probably be so desperate, you wouldn't even care what your hair looked like, which is saying something for your previous self. As the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky with colors that seem to mock your grim reality, you find yourself utterly, profoundly exhausted. Your body is a vehicle of pain, your mind a landscape of despair. You've moved from the acute terrors of war to the chronic agony of famine and displacement, discovering that each era presents its own unique brand of suffering. You yearn for the simplest things, a full stomach, a clean drink of water, a safe place to lay your head, and the comforting knowledge that tomorrow will bring some semblance of stability. Upon dears, distant echoes from a life you can barely remember as you curl up in your makeshift shelter, the cold night air biting at your exposed skin. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach is your constant companion. The distant sounds of the night, the wind, the rustling of leaves, perhaps the cries of other desperate souls, are your lullaby. Sleep, when it comes, is a brief, restless escape from the raw, unfiltered reality of your existence. 8. You drift off, perhaps dreaming of a single, perfect, hot meal, a moment of warmth and satiety in a world of endless hunger and cold. The last sound you hear is the faint, persistent rumble of your own empty stomach, a testament to the ongoing struggle. You stir, but the concept of waking up feels too grand for this slow, painful return to consciousness. Your body, accustomed to a perpetual state of hunger and exposure, registers a new kind of chill this morning, one that seems to penetrate deeper than before. Every muscle aches, every joint protests, and the gnawing emptiness in your stomach is now a familiar, if unwelcome, companion. Your clothes, little more than rags, offer scant protection against the biting wind. The air tastes of dust and despair. This is the enduring reality of the refugee, the displaced, the one who has lost everything and is still somehow, clinging to existence. Let's delve further into this aspect of, and more, by focusing on the erosion of hope and the profound psychological impact of prolonged, systemic adversity, a challenge that transcends specific historical periods but becomes acutely visible in times of widespread crisis. You face direct threats, the grind of labor and the despair of war, but this slow, persistent grind of uncertainty is a different kind of torture. The concept of a future, as we understand it, has completely vanished. There is no job to work towards, no home to return to, no long-term plan. You live solely in the present moment, driven by the most basic, primal needs: finding food, staying safe, enduring another day. This constant uncertainty, this lack of any discernible horizon, would be deeply unsettling for your modern mind. Your brain, wired for planning and goal setting, would struggle to cope with the absolute void of a phase. Future. Every sunrise is not a new opportunity, but merely another day to survive, another day without answers. Historians still argue whether the long-term psychological effects of famine and displacement in historical populations were as debilitating as modern understanding of trauma suggests, or if societal resilience mechanisms often provided coping strategies. The loss of dignity is a daily assault. You are reduced to begging, scavenging, or relying on the meager charity of others. Your self-respect, your sense of personal worth, would be slowly eroded by the constant indignities. You are no longer seen as an individual with a unique story, but as one of the masses, a statistic of suffering. This dehumanization, this stripping away of your inherent value, is perhaps the most painful aspect of your current existence. You'd find yourself doing things you never thought you would, just to survive, and then grappling with the shame and despair that follows. Your modern understanding of personal autonomy would be a cruel memory. Consider the pervasive fear of the unknown. Every new face is a potential threat or a potential source of aid, and distinguishing between them is a terrifying gamble. Every new rumor of a safe haven is tempered by the bitter experience of past disappointments. The world is a vast, unpredictable, and often hostile place. This constant state of vigilance, this inability to relax, would exhaust your nervous system. You'd be perpetually on edge, jumpy at every sound, suspicious of every gesture. This isn't the acute fear of battle, which eventually subsides or is replaced by action. It's a chronic, low-grade terror that never leaves you. The challenges of language and cultural barriers would be immense if you've been displaced to a foreign land. You can't communicate your needs, understand instructions, or connect with people on a deeper level. This linguistic isolation would compound your sense of vulnerability and loneliness. Imagine trying to explain your entire life story, your trauma, your needs, without a common language. It would be like trying to shout into a void. You might try to teach your children English, only to be met with blank stares, as they've never heard of such a strange tongue. The erosion of personal agency is profound. You are not choosing your path. You are being pushed along by circumstances beyond your control. You don't decide where to go, what to eat, or when to rest. These decisions are made for you by the flow of other refugees, by the availability of resources, by the whim of those in authority, or by sheer chance. Your ability to make choices, a fundamental aspect of your modern identity, has been completely taken away. You are no longer the captain of your own ship. You are a piece of flotsam on a vast, turbulent ocean. Even the smallest comforts are fleeting and precious. A moment of warmth, a sip of clean water, shared glance of understanding with another suffering soul. These are treasures clutched tightly before they disappear. Your modern self, accustomed to a constant stream of comforts and conveniences, when itself reevaluating the very definition of luxury. A dry spot on the ground, it's out of the wind, becomes a 5-star hotel. A single piece of stale bread, a gourmet meal, as the sun begins its slow descent, painting the sky with hues that seem to mock your grim reality. You find yourself utterly, profoundly exhausted. Your body is a vehicle of pain, your mind a landscape of despair. You've moved through different historical hardships, from the raw discomforts of the medieval age, to the dehumanizing grind of the industrial city, to the soul-shattering terror of total war, and now to the chronic agony of famine and displacement. You've learned that human suffering takes many forms, and that survival is often a far cry from living. You yearned for something simple, something clean, something peaceful, a quiet room, a warm bath, a meal that isn't rationed and flavorless, and most of all, the comforting knowledge that tomorrow will bring some semblance of stability, a hint of a future. But these are dreams, distant echoes from a life you can barely remember as you curl up in your makeshift shelter. It's a cold night air biting at your exposed skin. The gnawing emptiness in your stomach is your constant companion. The distant sounds of the night, the wind, the rustling of leaves, perhaps the cries of other desperate souls, are your lullaby. Sleep, when it comes, is a brief, restless escape from the raw, unfiltered reality of your existence. You drift off, perhaps dreaming of a single, perfect, hot meal. It's a moment of warmth and satiety in a world of endless hunger and cold. The last sound you hear is the faint, persistent rumble of your own empty stomach, a testament to the ongoing struggle and the persistent whisper of the wind, carrying echoes of countless other desperate journeys throughout history. You stir, not gently, but with the full, jarring force of bone-deep exhaustion and persistent hunger. The air tastes of dust and the faint, acrid temps of hopelessness. Body is a patchwork of aches and protests, each movement a reminder of prolonged exposure and malnourishment. Your clothes, now little more than tattered rags, cling uncomfortably to your skin. You've moved through eras, from medieval squalor to industrial crime, from the terrors of war to the desolation of displacement, and each has left its indelible mark. Your spirit, once so resilient, is now a fragile, frayed thing, clinging to existence with a tenacity born more of instinct than will. Let's take another leap into thee and more. A shift to a historical period where disease, specifically, becomes the primary, overwhelming threat. One that makes you realize how utterly vulnerable humanity truly was before modern medicine. Imagine you are transported to a city in the midst of a major plague epidemic. Perhaps the Great Plague of London in 1665. The conditions are grim, and the fear is palpable. You are not a soldier, nor a refugee, but a citizen, trapped in a city, under siege by an invisible enemy. The first thing you'd notice is the pervasive, unsettling quiet. The bustling streets you might expect in a major city are eerily empty, or filled only with the chilling cries of "Bring out your dead." The air is heavy with the scent of death and the acrid smell of burning tar and pitch, used in a desperate attempt to ward off the contagion. Your modern understanding of germ theory would be utterly useless. Here, people believe the disease is spread by miasma, bad air, or through divine punishment. They wear bird-like masks filled with sweet-smelling herbs or carry posies of flowers, hoping these will protect them. You'd know with chilling certainty that these efforts are futile. Historians still argue whether the extreme measures taken during plague outbreaks, such as quarantines and burning infected houses, has had any significant effect on slowing the disease, or if they merely exacerbated social panic. The fear is not just of death, but of a particularly gruesome and painful death. The symptoms of plague, fever, chills, vomiting, agonizing swellings, buboes in the armpits, groin, or neck, are horrific. You'd witness your neighbors, your friends, your family members succumb, their bodies racked with agony, their skin turning black. The speed of death is terrifying. A person seemingly healthy in the morning could be dead by nightfall. This pervasive, intimate encounter with death would be profoundly traumatizing. There's no hospital to go to, no vaccine, no cure. Doctors, if they dare to venture out, are often as clueless as anyone else, and just as likely to contract the disease themselves. Quarantine is common, often brutal. If someone in your household falls ill, your entire family might be locked into your home, marked with a red cross on the door, and left to die or recover. No one is allowed to enter or leave. Food and water are provided, if at all, through a small opening. This enforced isolation, watching your loved ones sicken and die around you, with no possibility of escape or assistance, would be a psychological hell. Your modern concept of individual rights would be utterly irrelevant in the face of public health mandates and overwhelming fear. You'd probably try to explain social distancing and hand washing, only to be met with blank stares and fear of you as a potential carrier. The social fabric unravels under the weight of the plague. Neighbors abandon neighbors, families flee, leaving the sick to die alone. Trade ceases, markets close, and the economy collapses. Law and order break down in some areas. Society itself is on the verge of disintegration. This profound sense of chaos and the breakdown of all familiar structures would be deeply unsettling. You'd yearn for the rigid, predictable order of the medieval feudal system, or even the grinding routine of the factory. Anything but this terrifying, unpredictable collapse. The stench is unimaginable. The sheer number of unburied bodies, the overflow of mass graves, tempt to burn infected houses, all contribute to an overwhelming aroma of decay and sickness. Even the strongest modern stomach would churn constantly. The air you breathe is literally heavy with the presence of death. You'd quickly learn to hold your breath, or to breathe shallowly, constantly. The loss of hope is perhaps the most insidious enemy. When so many are dying, when there is no apparent end in sight, when all human efforts seem futile against an invisible foe, despair sets in. You'd see the grim reality that your chances of survival are little more than a lottery. This utter powerlessness, this complete surrender to fate, would be a profound blow to your modern spirit, which believes in human agency and problem solving. You'd find yourself praying more, not out of piety, but out of sheer desperation, clutching at any straw of hope, however thin, as the sun begins its descent. Casting an eerie orange glow over the desolate, plague-stricken streets, you feel a profound exhaustion settle over you. It's not just physical. It's a weariness that permeates your very soul. You've endured the raw discomforts of the medieval age, the dehumanizing grind of the industrial city, the soul-shattering terror of total war, the chronic agony of famine and displacement, and now the intimate horror of a devastating plague. You've seen humanity at its most vulnerable and at its most desperate. You are utterly, completely drained, your spirit bruised and broken. You yearn for something simple, something clean, something peaceful, a quiet room, a warm bath, a meal that isn't rationed and flavorless, and most of all, the comforting knowledge that tomorrow will bring some semblance of stability, a hint of a future, and perhaps a world without the omnipresent shadow of a terrifying, unseen killer, as you huddle in your silent, quarantined dwelling, listening to the chilling cries outside. The fear is a cold, hard knot in your stomach. The air, heavy with the scent of death and disease, makes every breath an act of defiance. Sleep, when it comes, is a brief, restless escape, haunted by images of suffering and the constant nagging fear that the fever will begin for you too. You drift off, perhaps dreaming of a future where invisible enemies can be conquered, where medicine can offer solace, and where the air smells of something other than decay. The last sound you hear before oblivion takes you is the faint, distant ringing of the parish death bell, counting the latest victims. You stir, not from the peaceful descent into mourning, but from the sudden, sharp awareness of your own vulnerability. The air still carries the faint, cloying scent of illness and the underlying dread of a city gripped by unseen forces. Your body, perpetually on edge, feels like a bundle of raw nerves. Your throat is dry, your stomach hollow, and the lingering sense of powerlessness from the plague era still clings to you like a shroud. You've journeyed through many hardships, and each has compounded the reality. Your modern self is ill-equipped for a past where safety nets simply don't exist. Let's continue this in more exploration by shifting our focus not to a specific place or time, but to the pervasive, universal lack of creature comforts that defined almost all human existence until very, very recently. Imagine, for a moment, the sheer, unrelenting physical discomforts that would assail you, day in and day out, regardless of whether you were in a medieval hut or an 18th century hovel. First, there's the universal discomfort of temperature regulation. No air conditioning in summer, no central heating in winter. You are perpetually too hot or too cold. In summer, you sweat constantly, your clothes cling uncomfortably, and flies and insects buzz around you relentlessly. There's no escape from the oppressive heat, no cool drink readily available, no fan to stir the stagnant air. In winter, the cold seeps into your bones, your fingers and toes are perpetually numb, and the risk of frostbite is real. You huddle around a meager fire, your clothes and hair reeking of smoke, your skin dry and cracked. The modern concept of a perfectly climate-controlled environment, where you can set your thermostat to a precise degree, is a fantasy beyond comprehension. You'd probably find yourself thinking, if only I had a personal cooling mist, and then immediately realize how ridiculous that thought was. Historians still argue whether historical populations simply felt temperature extremes less due to adaptation, or if they just had a higher tolerance for perpetual discomfort born of necessity. Then there's the constant irritation of insects. Flies are everywhere, buzzing around food, landing on your skin and carrying disease. Mosquitoes bite, leaving itchy welts. Fleas and lice are a persistent nuisance, causing endless itching and sleepless nights. There are no repellents, no screens on windows. No effective ways to rid your home or your body of these tiny, relentless tormentors. You would live in an perpetual state of itchiness, a constant low-grade distraction from every other hardship. Your modern aversion to bugs would quickly turn into a resigned acceptance, or perhaps a deep, abiding hatred. The pervasive lack of cleanliness extends beyond just your body. Everything around you is dirty. Your clothes, your dwelling, your tools, your food, dust, dirt, grime, and animal waste are simply everywhere. There are no vacuum cleaners, no cleaning products, no easy access to vast quantities of clean water. You are living in a state of perpetual uncleanliness, and the thought of true, pristine cleanliness becomes a distant, unattainable ideal. This would be a profound mental challenge for your modern self, accustomed to sterile environments and readily available disinfectants, to probably find yourself compulsively brushing at unseen dust, a futile gesture. The lack of soft, comfortable surfaces is another daily assault. Your bed is hard, your chairs are unpadded, your shoes offer no cushioning. Every surface you touch, every step you take, is a reminder of this fundamental discomfort. Your body, accustomed to soft mattresses, ergonomic chairs, and cushioned sneakers, would be in constant protest. Your joints would ache, your back would be stiff, and your feet would be perpetually sore. You'd yearn for the simple luxury of a comfortable couch, a plush carpet, or a soft, absorbent towel. You'd find yourself dreaming of memory foam and the smells. While we've touched on this, let's emphasize the sheer variety and intensity of unpleasant odors that would define your world. Human waste, animal waste, rotting food, unwashed bodies, smoke, industrial fumes, disease. These aren't just occasional whiffs. They are the pervasive background aroma of life. Your sense of smell, once a source of pleasure, would be constantly assaulted, forced to adapt to a reality of overwhelming stench. The idea of a fresh scent or air freshener would be an alien concept, one you'd be desperate to introduce. The lack of light, as discussed, is profound. But think about the subtle effects. Acute. Your eyes would constantly strain in the dimness, leading to perpetual fatigue and possibly permanent vision problems. Your natural desire to read, to create intricate crafts, or to simply see clearly after dusk would be frustrated. You'd find yourself adapting to a world of shadows and dim outlines, your other senses heightened by necessity. The simple act of illuminating a room with a single, bright, steady light source would be a miracle. As the sun begins its slow descent, caning the sky with colors that seem to mock your grim reality, you find yourself utterly, profoundly exhausted. Your body is a vehicle of pain, your mind a landscape of despair. You've moved through different historical hardships, from the raw discomforts of the medieval age to the dehumanizing grind of the industrial city, to the soul-shattering terror of total war, the chronic agony of famine and displacement, the intimate horror of a devastating plague, and now the unrelenting daily assault of sheer physical discomforts. You've learned that human suffering takes many forms, and that survival is often a far cry from living. You yearn for something simple, something clean, something peaceful, a quiet room, a warm bath, a meal that isn't rationed and flavorless, and most of all, the comforting knowledge that tomorrow will bring some semblance of stability, a hint of a future, and perhaps a world where warmth is not fleeting and comfort is not a dream. As you curl up in your makeshift shelter, the cold, night air biting at your exposed skin, the gnawing emptiness in your stomach is your constant companion. The distant sounds of the night, the wind, the rustling of leaves, perhaps the cries of other desperate souls, are your lullaby. Sleep, when it comes, is a brief, restless escape from the raw, unfiltered reality of your existence. You drift off, perhaps dreaming of a single, perfect, hot meal, a moment of warmth and satiety in a world of endless hunger and cold. The last sound you hear is the faint, persistent rumble of your own empty stomach, a testament to the ongoing struggle, and the persistent whisper of the wind, carrying echoes of countless other desperate journeys throughout history, and the profound, universal yearning for a life free from constant discomfort. You stir, but it's not the gentle awakening you might remember from a life of modern ease. It's more like surfacing from a deep, troubled dive, your body protesting every inch of the ascent. The air is still cold, still heavy with a lingering sense of your current, deeply uncomfortable reality. Your limbs are stiff, your muscles ache, and that persistent cough, a souvenir from so many harsh eras, still rattles in your chest. You've navigated the medieval, the industrial, the wartime, the displaced, and the eternally uncomfortable. And now, as we reach the final stage of our journey, let's consider the pervasive lack of privacy and personal autonomy across all these historical landscapes, a theme that truly binds them together. Imagine a life where you are almost never truly alone. In a medieval peasant dwelling, your entire family, and sometimes your livestock, share a single room. Every conversation, every private moment, every bodily function is witnessed, or at least audible. In an industrial tenement, you share a cramped space with your family and often other families, the thin walls offering no barrier to the sounds and smells of your neighbors. In the trenches of war, you are literally shoulder to shoulder with dozens of other men, constantly under observation, with no place to retreat, no corner of solitude. As a refugee, you are one among many, sleeping in open spaces or crowded camps, your every move public. Your modern need for personal space for moments of quiet introspection, for a sense of individuality would be completely suffocated. Historians still argue whether the apparent lack of privacy in pre-modern societies led to a different, perhaps more communal, sense of self, or if the individual yearning for solitude simply remained unfulfilled. This lack of privacy intertwines directly with the profound absence of personal autonomy. Your choices are severely limited, if they exist at all. As a serf, your life is dictated by your lord. As a factory worker, by the rhythm of the machine and the whims of the owner. As a soldier, by your commanders. As a refugee, by the overwhelming circumstances and the unpredictable flow of events. Even your religious beliefs and practices are often prescribed, leaving little room for personal interpretation. Your modern concept of choosing your own career, your own spouse, your own path in life would be an utterly alien idea, a luxury reserved for an impossibly distant future. You are a component of a larger system, and your role is predetermined. This fundamental lack of control over your own destiny would be profoundly frustrating and ultimately soul-crushing. You'd try to explain personal branding to your medieval self, and you'd probably just end up being branded with an iron. The weight of societal expectations is immense. In a world without anonymity, where everyone knows everyone else's business, conformity is paramount. Deviate from tradition, challenge authority, or express unconventional thoughts, and you risk not only social ostracization, but tangible consequences. Your reputation is your everything, and a single misstep can follow you for a lifetime. There's no escaping your past, no reinventing yourself in a new city. Your identity is fixed, woven into the fabric of your community. This would be incredibly stifling for your modern spirit, which values individualism and self-expression. Even your body is not truly your own. It is a tool for labor, a vessel for reproduction, a resource to be exploited. Your health is not a right, but a constant battle against disease and injury with little medical intervention. Your life expectancy is low, and your body is worn out by early age. The modern concept of body positivity or self-care would be utterly incomprehensible. Your body is simply what gets you through the day, a constant source of pain and effort. Consider the pervasive lack of information, and thus true understanding. Your worldview is incredibly localized, filtered through rumor, superstition, and the pronouncements of authority. The vast, interconnected web of knowledge that you take for granted simply doesn't exist. This intellectual isolation means you cannot make truly informed decisions, cannot question the status quo with empirical evidence, and cannot conceptualize alternative ways of living. Your modern critical thinking skills would be starved of data, leaving you feeling ignorant and powerless. You'd likely find yourself becoming superstitious, simply to cope with the unexplainable as the sun begins its slow descent, casting long, tired shadows across the landscape of your current reality. You feel a profound exhaustion settle over you. It's not just physical. It's a weariness that permeates your very soul. You've moved through so many forms of human suffering, each stripping away another layer of your modern self, exposing the raw, vulnerable core of what it means to simply exist. You've learned that survival across all these eras is about endurance, about adapting to profound discomfort, danger, and the fundamental lack of control over your own life. You yearn for something simple, something clean, something peaceful, a quiet room, a warm bath, a meal that isn't rationed and flavorless, and most of all, it's the comforting knowledge that tomorrow will bring some semblance of stability, a hint of a future, and perhaps a world where privacy is a right and personal choice is a reality. As you curl up in your familiar, uncomfortable space, the sounds of your constrained world, the rustle of other bodies, the distant cries, the pervasive hum of the underlying anxieties are your lullaby. Sleep, when it comes, is a brief, restless escape from the raw, unfiltered reality of your existence. You drift off, perhaps dreaming of a world where you can close a door and truly be alone, where your choices matter, and where the future is not a terrifying void, but a canvas of possibilities. The last sound you hear is the slow, steady beat of your own heart, a fragile rhythm in a world that never truly stops demanding everything from you. As the final faint tendrils of tonight's journey begin to recede, leaving behind a profound stillness, you can slowly feel the weight of those historical realities lifting. The cold, the hunger, the constant ache in your bones, the relentless noise, the overwhelming smells, the creeping dread of disease and uncertainty. They begin to soften at the edges, dissolving into the quiet comfort of your own room. The echoes of medieval wood smoke, the acrid bite of industrial soot, the metallic temps of wartime fear, the gnawing emptiness of displacement, and the pervasive itch of historical discomfort. They are now just whispers, faint memories of a world you've only just visited. Allow your breath to deepen, to grow softer, as you let go of the tension that may have built up while imagining such profound hardship. Feel the familiar texture of your own bedding, the gentle warmth of your room, the reassuring quiet that settles around you. The idea of constant vigilance, of a life lived on the brink, can now gently fade, replaced by the profound security of your present moment. Notice the smooth surface beneath your fingers, the clean air filling your lungs, the absence of any insistent, raw discomfort. You are safe. You are warm. You are fed. The distant sounds of your modern world, perhaps the hum of a refrigerator or the gentle sigh of a fan, are not threats, but comforting reassurances. The vast, interconnected web of modern comfort and safety wraps around you, a stark contrast to the relentless challenges we explored. There is no urgency now, no pressing need, no immediate peril, just the soft, enveloping quiet of this moment. Let your mind drift, not back into the challenges, but forward into the gentle promise of undisturbed rest. The images of struggle and survival can now soften, blurring into the peaceful background of your thoughts. All those forgotten discomforts, the constant fight for basic existence, fade away. The journey is over, and you are here, safe and sound. Close your eyes, let your thoughts quiet, and just ... be. The deep, restorative sleep you deserve awaits. A profound blessing in a world that has learned to offer comfort, a luxury that was once only a distant dream. Sleep now, deeply and peacefully.